Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. It's a great pleasure to speak and support this bill, a very timely bill to be introduced to allow TV channels to broadcast digital content or HD, high-definition digital content on their primary channel. It's very timely because this weekend, of course, the football finals begin, at least in the real football code in this country, in the National Rugby League, of course. It's very exciting as a Queensland senator that this weekend the two preeminent Queensland teams this year, Brisbane Broncos and the North Queensland Cowboys, will be playing against each other this Saturday night. Now, I am advised that unfortunately it's unlikely that that game can be broadcast in high definition on the primary channel, but I'm hopeful. That this won't be the last time the Brisbane Broncos and the North Queensland Cowboys face each other in this final series, and actually, hopefully, they'll end up playing against each other on the big day on the first Sunday of October. And if that's the case, it may very well be the case that if this bill goes through the parliament, Queenslanders will not only be able to view the very first NRL final very first NRL final between two Queensland teams, very first time in history. They'll also be able to view it the first time in history in high definition, and that'll be a great thing. Won't that be a great thing? Because I am pretty confident that the Broncos and the Cowboys have been the best teams this season. They didn't finish top. But I think over the course of the 26 rounds, the Brisbane Broncos and the North Queensland Cowboys were the best, and I do think they may end up in the finals. Now, I know through you, Mr Acting Deputy President, Senator Carr doesn't probably follow this the game that is the preeminent, the most watched game in Australia.
Order. Resume your seat, Senator Canavan. Is there a point of order, Senator McEwen?
Thank you. My point of order is on the matter of relevance, Mr Acting Deputy President. I too could stand up and talk fulsomely about Port Adelaide's performance this year in the Australian Football League. I've chosen not to do so.
All right, resume your seat. Resume your seat, Senator McEwen. No, Senator McEwen, resume your seat. The bill is about high-definition sporting broadcasts, and I think that Senator Canavan is relevant to the bill, however obtusely. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I will get to the details of this bill, but I think it's very important to connect with the Australian people about why we do things in this place, because the actual provisions of this bill are very technical and complex, but it's very important to understand why we do these things in this parliament. And Senator Carr may have a different view, and Senator McEwen may have a different view, but I actually think for the vast majority of Australians, the football finals this weekend will be a very engaging event. It's something that certainly I look forward to. Every year. Unfortunately, there's a Nationals Party convention this weekend. It happens to be. I probably won't be able to watch the Brisbane Broncos and the Cowboys live, but I will be able to watch them on a replay on Foxtel in high definition, whereas you can't do that at the moment on the primary TV channel. And that's why we need these changes in this bill, because at the moment, the free-to-air broadcasters are restricted in what they can show and broadcast compared to some of their competitors, including Foxtel, the pay TV channels, which do broadcast their content often at least in high definition to some who choose to buy a Foxtel high definition set-top box. But the free-to-air channels can't do that at the moment. They are restricted on their primary channel to only showing standard definition content, and we believe, as the government, and I believe it's been shown in the review, and I certainly believe that it's time to remove that restriction and allow free-to-air broadcasters to compete on a level playing field. So this bill is called the Broadcasting Legislation Amendment Primary Television Broadcasting Service Bill, but perhaps it could be, and hopefully should be, called Broadcasting the First Queensland NRL Grand Final in High Definition Bill 2015. I certainly hope that happens. And what does this bill do? Well, in detail, it removes the restriction that a free-to-air broadcaster has to broadcast standard definition content on their primary broadcasting channel. Now, that primary broadcasting channel is a traditional 9, 7, 10 channel, not their multi-channels, which they can broadcast high-definition content on. Their multi-channels like Gem, 1, and I'm trying to throw what's one of the Channel 7 ones? 7 Mate, I think. So this will allow them to broadcast those that high-definition content for the first time on their primary channel. It does not require them to broadcast high-definition content on that channel. They have the option to do that, and presumably and likely they'll only need to take that option up in where there is a widely viewed content, such as a major football final or sporting event, where there's lots of Australians viewing it, and of course high-definition content is something that adds something to the experience. We're probably unlikely. Hopefully we don't get high-definition broadcasts of Parliament, because I don't know about you, Senator Carr, but I'm not always the best. Yeah, I'm not all. Yeah, exactly, Senator McEwen. I don't particularly want to do that. So hopefully that won't be a consequence of this particular legislation. But it also on their primary channels, free-to-air networks provide captioning services for the hearing impaired, and they will also be protected in this legislation, that they will continue to be provided, including in high-definition content if required. Now, these amendments are needed, as I did hint in my opening remarks, that because other competitors require or can provide content in high definition, but free-to-air networks can't. So this will allow them to do that, and it reduces regulation for that. Now, this particular bill, or the recommendations in this bill, were recommended by an inquiry early last year. It's gone through consultation. There was a Newspoll survey done early next year showing that most Australians now have access to high-definition content. Indeed, at the time, early last year, around 96% of Australian households can access high-definition content. And that figure's probably risen since then, because the uptake of high-definition set-top boxes have been increasing over time. And it's a case that set-top boxes are relatively cheap at the moment, have been for some time, and that has driven uptake of these receivers. But I just had a look at Dick Smith at the moment. If anyone's interested, you can get a high-definition set-top box with a USB personal video recording capability as well for $49.98. It is quite cheap, and that accords with the advice in this bill that we've been provided, that around $50, around that $50 mark, would provide access to high-definition content. And so it is something that most Australians will be able to access and be able to afford, and indeed that's the case already at the moment. Now, it's interesting that consumers themselves can provide a set-top box, or go and buy a set-top box for around $40 or $50, and that has driven uptake. $20, even $20. I don't think high definition though, Senator Collins. I did through you, Mr. Acting, I did do a bit of a search, and I couldn't find a high definition set-top content for $20. But perhaps Senator Collins can provide some advice to Senator Conroy, whoever is the communications spokesman now, because you might recall, through you, Mr. Acting President, to Senator Collins, that when Labor were last in government, they went out and bought some set-top boxes for Australians. They went out and thought they'd tender for set-top boxes, and I recall, and there's an article in The Australian here from February 2012, where Senator Conroy, who was the Communications Minister at the time, revealed that the average price of, and these weren't necessarily high-definition set-top boxes, I should add, the average price of set-top boxes under that program, under the Household Assistance Scheme, was $698. $698 for a set-top box. You can go down to Dick Smith and buy them for $50, and they charge the Australian taxpayer $700 for these set-top boxes. That was the average price. The average price. Yeah, let's put it into context then. Let's very much do that, because it does go into more detail here that Senator Conroy tried to explain this seemingly massive blowout. Originally, the costs were $350 set-top box in the budget in 2011. They blew out to $700, a doubling of the budget for this program, which wasn't unusual in the former Labor government. But the set-top boxes. I had to brush up on it, Senator Fifield. But $700. I think you might have missed that. $700 on average for a set-top box under this program. Senator Conroy tried to explain this by saying that, well, actually, that was just an average price, and the costs ranged from $158 to $1,528. So some households were being charged, well, they weren't being charged, sorry, taxpayers were being charged. Taxpayers were being charged $1,528 for a set-top box. For a set-top box, not a TV. It didn't have any high-definition content. It wasn't a smart TV or an internet-connected TV or a Wi-Fi TV or an Android TV or an Apple TV. It was a set-top box, and it cost $1,500 under the former Labor government. So I thought, that's interesting. What could you buy for $1,500 at the moment down at Dick Smith? And at the moment, you could buy a 55-inch Samsung TV. I'm thinking about a new TV actually at the moment. It's this 55-inch Samsung TV, smart TV, full high definition for $1,500. That's what you could get. That's what the Australian consumer could get in the shops when they're smart and savvy about what they're doing. Usually they are. But the former Labor government, they could get for $1,500 a set-top box. A set-top box. Harvey Norman, JB Hi-Fi and Dick Smith must have been laughing to the bank because the Labor Party, they saw the Labor Party coming and they charged them that amount of money for a program which was simply set-top boxes. People could have gone out and bought a full TV with full digital TV capabilities, indeed HD capabilities for that price, but that wasn't how the Labor Party rolled in government. How they rolled was to whatever the cost, whatever the price, that didn't matter. All that mattered was getting through the next day for them, and that's how we ended up with debacles like the set-top box scheme, which was a complete waste of money. Hundreds of millions of dollars. It was about $308 million was budgeted in 2011 for that program, and it was turned out to be another example of waste from the Labor Party and another example of inefficiency from a Labor government. And that's not the approach we have taken. We do provide assistance to people, but allow them to buy their own set-top boxes, make their own consumer decisions. It was also, I did forget here, there was not only did it cost an enormous amount of money, the actual service that was provided was at times incredibly deficient. There was a Miss Diane Pascoe at the time from Warrnambool requested assistance under this scheme. She had 4 visits to her home by departmental contractors. 4 visits by the contractors without actually connecting up the set-top box properly. four visits. I reckon I could go install my grandma's set-top box in less than 4 visits, but 4 visits from contractors, all charged the taxpayer. And then, after those 4 visits, and none of them was satisfactory, Miss Pascoe had to go out and pay for a digital box and install it herself. She did it all on her own for $100. For $100. And the Labor Party was charging people more than $600 on average to do this service, and often they're not even getting it right. And if you can't install set-top boxes in people's homes, you can't run a government. Surely, Mr Acting Deputy President, if you can't install a set-top box, you can't be trusted to run the Australian government, and that's what their approach was. Now, thankfully, most Australians didn't have to rely on the Labor government to provide their TVs or their digital content. They've gone and done that themselves, and as I've said, around 96, perhaps more now, 96% of households do have access to high-definition content. But they have access to a lot more than that now as well. Since that time, certainly services such as Netflix, Stan, Presto, 10Play, other forms of digital content that are delivered through iPads has ballooned in popularity, and is probably ABC. Thank you, Senator Collins. ABC iView. I'm a regular user of that as well. All of these services now provided in many different platforms than through your TV, and in many different platforms than just a broadcasting service. And that has, of course, put substantial competitive pressures on the free-to-air TV broadcasters, and they're probably only going to increase because really I believe we are only seeing the genesis of this change, and over time more and more Australians, as they get better internet, also through a scheme that we've improved since coming to government through the National Broadband Network, as people get more and more and better internet through the National Broadband Network, I believe these kinds of services delivered largely through the internet rather than through broadcasting spectrum will become more popular and that will create a greater competitive threat to free-to-air broadcasters. And that's one of the reasons why we need this change to help remove red tape and regulation from the free-to-air TV sector so that they can compete with these new services on a more level playing field. And I also would like to make some comments about the broader regulatory landscape in this area, because there are other restrictions than simply this one on free-to-air TV broadcasters, and restrictions that at least some free-to-air TV broadcasters at the moment feel is limiting their scope to compete with other forms of TV and digital content. In particular, we do have restrictions on mergers, specific restrictions on mergers in the media landscape, in the broadcasting landscape. The one that affects TVs most directly is colloquially known as the REACH rule, or the 75% rule, which restricts any broadcasting provider to only 75% of Australia's broadcasting scope. That has been in existence for a long time. Well, if people listen up, I might expand a little on that topic right now. So yeah, I think I can do it. I think I can do it in 4.5 minutes. So this has been a long-standing restriction and rule in our broadcasting. I think in the late 1980s, it might have been Paul Keating, or it might have been the early 1990s. But it's been at least 20 years we've had this rule, and it's been reviewed a number of times. It is quite a blunt rule. It's unusual to have a restriction on mergers in a particular landscape of 75%, or any particular number for that matter, but we have that in our broadcasting space. But we do have it for a reason. It does have a reason behind it, and the reason is that it guarantees a diversity of broadcasters in our landscape. It means, by definition, that in the 25% left, apart from that 75%, there has to be dedicated regional broadcasters. Channel 9, 10, 7 cannot cover the field, if you like. They cannot, by law, cover 100% of Australia. So there has to be some regional broadcasters, and that's why we have WIN, Prime, Southern Cross as well, and NBN. Now, it is blunt, and I recognise that, and almost every review that has been done since that time has recognised difficulties or issues with this particular REACH rule. In saying that, as I say, it does serve a purpose. I do believe that Australians want a diverse media landscape. I do believe that Australians want to have local news and local content delivered in their local area. And I do believe, therefore, that we need to have some protections in our legal framework to allow and permit broadcasters, or the media industry more generally, to deliver that diverse landscape. Now, at the moment as it stands, if the 75% rule was removed, or there's some other rules such as the 2 and 3 rule as well, which goes to more than just TVs, were removed, what would happen is if there were to be a proposed merger between two broadcasting entities, that merger would be assessed by the ACCC under Section 50 of the Competition and Consumer Act. Now, that Act deals obviously with matters of competition and economic efficiency, and the ACCC has to be bound by the provisions of that Act when looking at any potential merger. I have great scepticism that any such process could adequately deal with the issues of media diversity through Section 50 alone. Section 50 itself is there to protect competition, not to promote any kind of diversity or any kind of specific promotion of a minimum number of players in a market. What the Trade Practices Act or the Competition and Consumer Act now is focused on is delivering outcomes that are in the best interests of consumers, not necessarily saying that there must be a minimum number of competitors in a market, whereas I believe in the media landscape at least there is a different set of issues that need to be considered here. And that means that there possibly would need to be specific media rules around mergers and acquisitions in this space. I do note that other reviews that have been done in this area, such as the Productivity Commission's Broadcasting Review and the Convergence Review a few years ago, have both called into question the 75% rule, and also the 2 and 3 rule, but they have also made the point that a diverse media landscape is an important goal and objective for public policy and perhaps needs protection through other ways and means. And at this stage at least, I note that those who are seeking to remove that 75% rule, have not really put forward a specific proposal to deal with issues of media diversity, apart from just the competition issues. But I'm sure those issues will continue to be considered and debated, both here in the Parliament and in the wider public policy sphere. I'll return to the specific aspects of this bill, which I fully support. As I said at the start, I do very much hope that Channel 9 in particular, as I'm more of a rugby league fan myself, can be able to provide the final in high definition. I hope that at least one Queensland team, maybe two, are there. But if they're not, I'll still be watching, along with millions of other Australians who can finally enjoy the preeminent and premier sporting event in our nation's calendar in high definition on their big screen TVs.